Hello and welcome to Note to File, a clinical research podcast.
A collection of interviews, candid commentary, and general nonsense for the clinical research community.
Check us out at notetofilepodcast.com.
And now, without further ado, on to the show.
All right. Hey, guys. Welcome to another Note to File Live. Denali, how's it going?
Good, man. It's good. It's finally officially fall, which is my favorite season.
Is it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Officially.
I didn't know that. Someone should tell the state of Oklahoma that.
How are you doing?
I'm good. Today is National Pot Pie Day, and I'm a really big fan of pot pies, so I'm looking forward to...
How are you celebrating?
Probably a long nap after eating too much pot pie.
Huh. I mean, I feel like my only memory of pot pie is those like really cheap like Swanson ones that I get as a kid.
You're doing it wrong.
Yeah, well, a gluten-free pot pie is not like probably the best.
No, that sounds terrible, man. Guys, welcome our guests today, Liz Beatty and Jovani Rivera. Guys, how's it going?
Good. Pleasure to be here.
Yes, thank you for having me back.
Yeah, absolutely. Good to see you both. Let's start out like we do. Let's get a little intro from you guys. Tell us about yourselves. Jovani, why don't you start, man?
Yep. So my name is Jovani Rivera. I'm the site director and founder of Novum Research. Been in the industry now over a decade and work on a lot of different clinical trials, and been working with Liz for a little bit now with Inato, and just happy to be here and share my insights on some of the stuff that we're doing.
Rock and roll. And Liz, I know you've been on the show, but remind people, what do you do?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Liz Beatty, co-founder, chief strategy officer at Inato. I think a lot of folks know my background, but as a refresher, I started at the site. So I was a coordinator at the MS clinic at Yale. I then went into pharma. I worked at Bristol Myers Squibb for a whole career in drug development. And now I'm here on the tech side, helping to bring the voice of the sites and sponsors forward and how tech can help, change the ecosystem of clinical trials, not just for one party or the other.
Rock and roll. I like to hear that. So, okay, you guys have been working together. So I'm curious what does that entail? What have you guys been cooking up?
Well, we've been looking at AI technology and research, and primarily in pre-screening efforts and streamlining that. It's been something that obviously sites are afflicted with. Site burden of pre-screening charts takes a lot of time, and with the new wave of technology, it's just been kind of a cheat code to screen that much more patients. And you have limited staff nowadays, and you have coordinators that are not as well equipped as the older days where we had to understand protocols, read protocols, and so we don't have the luxury of that anymore. And so using technology to outsource some of the day-to-day and increase the efficiency of identifying patients has been something that has been top of mind for me at my site and amongst others that I've worked with. And so Inato's been doing excellent work on creating a tool to help us. And I've been fortunate in the beginning to kind of give them some feedback on some of my thoughts of how I would like to use the tool, or how the tool needed a couple little tweaks here and there. So I started early on with them, and I mean, they've leaps and bounds in just a very short period of time. And now we're working on bigger projects, and it's been kind of exciting to see how efficient this barrier has become with technology.
So a vendor listening to a site and taking their feedback, that's a crazy the idea.
I was just going to say that that's part of our foundation for why we build tech, is we want to really solve real pain points. So to understand someone's pain, you have to listen, you have to be a part of the process with them, and you have to listen all the way along the way, because it's not easy to just adopt new technology. It's how does this fit into all the rest of my workflows and tech that I have and processes that I have. It's the human plus tech plus process approach that we really focus on. And to do that well, you need to listen to your users and really make sure you're building tech that suits a real need that they have, and then know when to stop and integrate into the rest of their systems and processes, because it's not worth duplicating or trying to change the way people work, or more how do you really solve that pain point and go from there.
Yeah, and it's interesting. We'll talk more about sort of the just general push down of technology to sites from sponsors. But I mean, this is something that's always struck me as sort of uniquely a sort of technology that a site can own. I mean, not own it. Obviously, they have to use a vendor. I mean, most sites aren't developing their own AI technology, but the sort of AI pre-screen. I mean, it's been around for a while now. I think we saw some iterations of it early. I played around with it. At first, it was just you got to have this like crazy backdoor connection through layers of IT support in clinics that like we don't have access to that. They're not going to give us this kind of stuff. And it seems like that is evolving a lot across companies that are doing this. I don't know, you guys have a little bit of a different approach to it too. I'm curious to hear just a little bit about how you guys are attacking that, and what input, maybe specifically what input was given from the site, because I've definitely worked with vendors and I'm like, this doesn't make any sense from a site perspective. Like, somebody cooked this up, great, maybe the technology is great, but like this does not really jive with like what a site does on a day-to-day basis. So I guess, yeah, walk me through a little bit of some of that, because it is intriguing to me.
Yeah, so for us, it's really about giving sites options, because actually, as you think about it, not all sites are the same, and their needs vary
different,
quite a bit. So we're also global in our technology. So if you think about the U.S. sites and the diversity, you then add all the different countries and different ways that health records are stored and utilized by different types of sites. It becomes quite the complex question about how do you do this well. So what we do is we really listen to sites and understand there are more than one way to access patient information and to address this pain point. That just chart review takes a lot of manual effort in the old way of working, of reading charts and trying to find those data points for each IE criteria. So we give sites options. We started out with our tech very simple, that you could upload a PDF. And now we've gone all the way through that you can integrate with your EHR. We really think about those options. How do you provide value early to sites? How do you get them in the tech, using it, giving us feedback so we can improve it, and then building from there based on their request. So it was actually sites that came to us and said, this is working. I want to use this more holistically across my practice. Can I integrate into my EMR? The answer is yes. And then up next is, can we then integrate into the CTMS? Because that's where I manage the next steps for my patients. And we were like, yes, absolutely. We don't need to remake how you're managing your current patient flow today. We can integrate into your processes and provide a better experience for sites that's really customizable and configurable to how your site's set up, instead of being one size fits all.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Sort of like, how do you manage that like development and collaboration with those sites, given that there's such a wide array of sites and their needs and what's important? So balancing getting site feedback, but also not letting the horse run away with the carriage too, where it's, everyone has opinions, and you have, at some point you have to say, okay, this is what we're going to do. Like, how do you balance that?
Yes. So we actually use early adopters. So like Jovani's a great example. He said he was with us really early in this process to help us really get in deep and understanding how this would work at a site and understanding their needs much more deeply. And then from there, we go out and understand what's the landscape look like more broadly. So there are an infinite number of electronic medical record systems out there. So
absolutely,
who are the top ones that our sites use? How would we integrate with them efficiently so it's not a burden for sites? So it becomes understanding the site needs and pain points coupled with that landscape review to prioritize, where do we start? What do we prioritize internally too? We're also a business, we're a small startup. So focus and prioritization becomes part of our, critical needs as well as we build our business. So it starts with the site, understanding their needs deeply, going to understand the landscape, and then prioritizing from there how we can impact the most sites as possible with the investments we make.
I love that. I feel like I think it's super important to bring, regardless of the industry, bringing end users to that sort of development design technique. But I also think it's equally important to then have that like focus and prioritization, because I've also seen organizations who then decide to try to do everything and ultimately do nothing well because they try to take on too much because they want to do all of the things. To your point, there's no need to reinvent the wheel if it's already working. So I like that take. It looks like we have a question come in.
Yeah, so I'll actually hold the question because I want to. Yeah, hey,
Okay.
don't get so click happy over there. Okay. Because I want to ask Jovani first, because like the question I have for him kind of dovetails into this a little bit, because as a site, like I've been in this position where we want to try new technology, work with vendors like early on. I think it can be very challenging for sites, especially small sites who, well, first of all, like I get inundated. Like there's a lot of vendors who are coming in and like, hey, try this. Let's try this. Do you want to do this? Similar offerings that are, it's tough to decide like who to work with. And then, if you put your sort of eggs in somebody's basket early on and then they're like, nah, never mind. Like we went down a wrong path. Like, I guess talk to me a little bit about your mindset or like how you decided to work maybe with Inato specifically, because I'm sure you've been approached by others as well. Like it's a tough decision for sites. Like how do you sort of balance that? Because it is time and effort that may turn into nothing of value for you, like in the long run, but they need us, right? Like we need to work together with these vendors. I guess talk me through like your, maybe the mindset or process for you, like in making that decision.
Yeah. So yeah, there's no lack of vendors out there. There's a lack of quality vendors, that's for sure. But there's no lack of vendors, especially everybody's on the race to this AI world and things like that. But my biggest thing is I'm a big proponent of efficiency in every metric of a site. So, just because you recruit and able to identify a ton of patients doesn't mean that you have the infrastructure to support all those numbers coming in. And so, I've been approached, like probably you as well, with a lot of vendors offering, the whole gamut of making my life easier, and turns out they make my life worse. So, the idea is to understand the business first and foremost, and how that company, why they offer that, how they offer it, and is it worth integrating into our practice? Because ultimately it takes time to train people, to onboard people. It's a whole nother learning curve. Is it worth it? And so if it doesn't make sense to me, and it's not clear with talking with the owners or whoever developed the technology, then I'm not going to implement it, because obviously it should be clear and concise before I even get involved in it. So if I can't understand it, there's no, and you and I both know, if somebody knows and they build something, they know how it works. Like if you describe your site, you know exactly how it works, you understand, and you have a certain way of vocalizing it where it's kind of obvious, where you can read through the BS, So when I started working with Inato, I was like, okay, I've been fed a lot of it, a lot of other vendors offering the same thing. And I'm like, this would be amazing. And I do my own due diligence, my own research on the back end of technology as a whole and how to integrate it and what actually matters to integrate in the site. And then when I started working with Inato, we started doing like kind of business development and getting research sites, and they have a whole marketplace and things like that, which I thought was great. Then they offered this pre-screening tool. And I'll be honest, when I first started using it, I'm like, this is probably not going to save us much time, because we had to upload a document. We had to go through this whole process. And honestly, anybody who's worth their weight as a coordinator can look at a chart, look at an INE and say yay or nay for the most part. So the value proposition wasn't there. But what I appreciated with them was the constant communication, the constant feedback, and actual updates to their system as a result of a site's input, which, like you said in the beginning of the podcast, Brad, they listened, which is not common. And so I just kept going with it and seeing how much more feedback they would give, how much are they willing to work with me. And they did. They listened, and it got more and more efficient, to the point where it's like, yeah, like we're going to put this in place now where the coordinator is going to actually use it, and then get the coordinator's feedback, because it's one thing for me to like it. It's another thing for my staff to like it. and then for them to implement it, because it's kind of hard to add another layer. So it was a matter of just making everything efficient. And staff gets burnt out, coordinators get burnt out left and right. And so having an efficient process in recruiting, having an efficient process in seeing patients through and through, even in business development, is why I was so attracted to Inato, because they had the business development part of it. They listened to sites, and their technology evolved to actually be something I can utilize and teach. And so that's kind of not been something I've come across with other vendors, which you and I are both aware of, like a lot of the AI ones out there. And they charge a premium, they want all these things, and then you can't even, it's like, it makes no sense. And so it benefits not so much the end user as the person who created it. So that's kind of our method.
No, I want to, something you pointed out that I think is important and sometimes underappreciated is it's great. Like if I like something, cool. But if I hand it to my coordinators and they say, this sucks, then it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how much I like it. Now, I think you got to start somewhere, starting with the site. Administration is a good place to start. And but I think it's this interesting point that I've seen. I've tried to get better about, where I try to let my people loose on stuff much earlier, so that we're also not going to get too down a rabbit hole where they were like, no, this is never going to work. So sorry, Denali, you want to pull that question? I just think it dovetails nicely and over to Liz's side now.
Yeah. So how do you handle teams that are a little bit more resistant to change in terms of integrating tech or changing workflows for better efficiency? You found more or less interest in independent sites versus academic centers. What's your experience?
Yeah, so I think you really need to speak to the value, not the feature. So I think what we were trying to accomplish was actually making trials more efficient for sites. And, to be honest, based on the path that we took, starting with the BD part of the site's organizations, going into this area is a different set of users for us. So there are challenges there. Just because someone really liked our matching technology to help get access to more trials didn't mean that they would want to incorporate our patient pre-screening tech. They're different people at the center who often do those different roles. So for us, it was about building on existing relationships that we had, where sites that we've worked with in the past have given us feedback and we've built on it for our BD efforts. We could do the same for this offering. So I do think it does matter how you partner with sites and users, how you actually build the stuff they ask you for, and that does translate. So even though we weren't going to the same users for the new part of the tech, our change management then and adoption could be much harder. We built on the relationships we had with sites to say, we also know this is a pain point. Can we get access to a different part of your site where different users would use this and test it with us? And many sites said yes, because it is a real need. And they know we would stand by and deliver based on the feedback that they provided. So I think a lot of it is around how you actually build with people and that you do the things you said you're going to do, not just getting feedback for feedback's sake. Because I think that really erodes your relationship then and trust in spending the time on future, improvements in the technology. Well, now, when it comes to which sites use the tech today, I would say it's a very wide need in the space to become more efficient in clinical trials. So this efficiency piece that Jovani is referring to, I think resonates for all different types of sites, whether you're an academic center or independent research center or a network. Efficiency is becoming higher and higher of importance. What we see on our end is the complexity of integrating new tech changes by site type. So if you're a major academic center and you have a large IT infrastructure, you might want to build some of this tech, not buy it, because it's on your roadmap and you're going to make those investments, versus an independent research center likely don't have that level of investment to build it yourself and look to partner with vendors like us. So we don't see adoption as widespread yet in the academic centers, but we see widely from networks to independent research centers to small hospital systems. This is a pain point, and we can help them become more efficient in the work that they do.
Yeah. Well, and I think sort of keep coming back to this point, which I think is fascinating. Folks, I talked to folks about like, how do you pick what vendors? I mean, before we jumped on, we were talking about like the conference season and how like the next couple of months, everyone's in and out of their homes, right? Attending these conferences, and there's bajillion and one vendors out there. And so like, how do you pick what vendor to use? And people ask that question all the time. And I think what we're getting to here, and this is the advice I always give, is like, work with someone you like and someone you trust. Like, they got to listen to you. You have to listen to them, and you have to be able to work way forwards, especially in a place like this AI where it's continuing to evolve constantly. It can't be like, this is what we built, use it, or give us feedback, and we'll put it in our next cycle next year when we release it. Like, you just have to have someone you like to work with culturally. Like, your companies have to align at some level. And I think that's super important when you're looking at different vendors. And it seems like you guys have sort of struck that balance really nicely.
Yeah, to the question. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. I think there's a big lack in this industry of good management. And I think when it comes to people, even turnover or people who don't want to adopt the technology, I think it's shoved down their throats versus getting feedback, appropriate feedback. There's not a lot of good managers that manage sites. So if you have like real issues as to why this technology shouldn't be implemented, not just because it's going to add an additional layer of your day, then you should listen to that feedback. Because I think the feedback of your coordinators, the feedback of your recruiters, the feedback are essential if they're constructive and are going to take the site owner or the director or whoever, or the site, as a whole in a forward direction. But if you notice a pattern that only one person has an issue with this, or only one person, because a lot of times what I do with people who are not adopting a technology, I condense their time. So if I can condense the staff's time to produce a certain output, and they're the only ones that are not producing a result, it's not a pattern, it's an individual.
Yeah.
And so, what you do with these technologies is to amplify and open up more time for what matters, which AI can't replace, which is interpersonal relationships with your patients, with your staff, with your subjects and things like that, and even with your business development partners. It allows you to become more efficient where it matters, where you can take the human aspect out, like logistics and LLMs and reading documents and things like that, and give more interpersonal time. So if it's a logistics thing that somebody's not willing to adopt, and like I said, the big centers, they have a bigger budget to kind of create their own thing. But if it's something that somebody's not willing to adopt, not for the betterment of the company, but just because they don't want to do the work, then I think you need to look at a new staff member. Yeah,
it's really parsing out, is the problem the product, the process, or maybe the person?
Yeah, you have to measure those KPIs. If not, it'll bite you in the butt later on.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, fair point. Did I see, Liz, I mean, you guys are, and you mentioned it, but like now integrating, starts to get compelling to me, like integrating straight through CTMS. And did I see an announcement even today or within the last few days what you guys had integrated maybe with another CTMS at this point?
Yes, so we did have an announcement today with Real Time and Jovani. And it's really focused around, there are large networks in the US as well, where this technology could be implemented, and we could have a really efficient way of understanding patient availability. So with that partnership, we're looking to, bring together all the data we have on Inato on the patient access, coupled with the deep insights they have on networks and performance data, to provide much richer data to sponsors to make decisions around how to allocate sites in their programs. But this is, building on our foundation of access for sites, making sure we're going where the patients are, and then helping the sites that have access to patients get those trial opportunities. So for us, it's this ecosystem of how we partner with sites holistically to provide access to people in the clinical trial space from a patient perspective as well.
And so I assume this must cost like $1 million a year for a site, right?
Oh, no. I think this is where we're really
teeing you up. I'm teeing you up here.
Yes, this is where we're really differentiated. So we've always been free for community sites and independent research sites. So we've maintained that all the way through even our patient pre-screening tool. We are looking at ways to provide differentiated experiences for large networks, and maybe there will be some costs associated with that in the future. But holistically, we're trying to make the process more efficient and better for patients through their trusted care teams at research centers. So we stay very much aligned, and that's our mission. And we're not trying to add barriers for sites to get access to this tech. We're trying to actually make it easier for folks. I have gotten a lot of recent feedback that we should be charging because free tech is not good tech, which I don't agree with. You can have good tech and it can still be free. So we need to get the word out to sites that just because it's free doesn't mean the tech doesn't work. The tech totally works. We've been publishing on it. We have an incredible team working on the tech, and we just don't want any barriers for entry for sites, especially smaller centers, to be able to have the same access to this technology as large centers. So I stress to everyone, go and sign up and use it. It's available, and it can really help in many different ways. It could help from a training perspective for new coordinators coming in who maybe don't have all of the ins and outs of all your protocols. It could help just efficiencies and screening more of your patients. So there's a lot of different ways sites use it, and it doesn't need to be, an expensive piece of tech to add to your tech stack.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. It's like it's the opposite of a sunk cost fallacy, where it's like if it's free, people just inherently don't necessarily value it quite as much, or they assume, make assumptions that it's not quality because the cost isn't there. I think it's an interesting
Conundrum.
lame here. Conundrum, that's the word. I was gonna say hill to climb, and I was like, oh, that's douchey. I don't want to say that. I was gonna say conundrum to come up against, because you don't want to necessarily change it per se, but you also are still sort of fighting an upstream battle there.
Yeah, I could see it. So, okay, you guys, you mentioned EMR connection. I think, I don't know, Jovani, how much, community advertising and dealing with like incoming or retrieving medical records, getting those screened in. Like, talk to me a little bit about how you guys are tackling that, or are you?
Yeah, most definitely. So we work with a lot of local doctors around our area, and PIs are second hat is research, first hat is clinical. They you really got to get them to understand what it is that you're trying to do and see the value in an EMR integration, specifically now with all the phishing and the data breaches and things like that. A lot of people up in arms, and for the right reasons, so educating them as to how this will be safe is important. This is where Liz and her team do a great job of just letting them know this is something that is here to make the process more efficient. And once you hear efficiency and you're able to, we're going to screen more patients with less burden on your medical assistants or less burden on us coming into your site and getting into your EMR, we haven't had any real issues getting access to our sub-Is or our referring physicians' EMRs as far as just doing basic chart review. It's when you start to say, hey, I want to integrate this third-party vendor into your system, that's when, it becomes a more of a discussion. I've been able to successfully do it with 2 of my physicians. And so right now, I'm literally waiting for a bolus of patients to come through for a whole bunch of my IBD trials. So I'm very excited about that, to kind of see how, because just based off what I've been doing, I'm like, yeah, this is pretty cool stuff. It's like ChatGPT for research, and it's so animated, and I'm a big AI guy when it comes to using it for the right reasons, not letting it use us. And so when I started integrating with it and finding like-minded physicians that were oh yeah, we're interested in making our practice more efficient. I mean, now I have my doctors doing AI scribing, and so I think it's becoming less taboo in this day and age to mention this kind of technology, but there are barriers to safety. And I think overall in time, it'll be more adopted either by force or by, just selecting that people are just either going to use a technology like this and excel, or they're going to be left behind. And it's one of those things where you have to look at Kodak. I mean, they didn't think digital photography was going to be a thing, and now they're not on the map. So
Right.
I think we need to at least start messing with this technology, interacting with it, and finding its value and integrating it in a way where, it makes what we do easier and keeps people staffed with our sites, and and it just kind of makes our life a little bit easier, not necessarily replace anything.
Yeah.
And the tech is really aimed at not replacing the person. It's helping the person, which I think is a really important part of how we should be thinking about AI.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of irony. I don't know if the irony is right. We're frankly, if there are more patients to screen, then you need to hire more people to screen those patients. So if anything, in many ways, if I have more efficient identification of potential patients, process for that, I actually need more humans, to then see the patient. So again, it's a place where this kind of technology makes perfect sense. And again, it's additive, when it comes to the human element, if anything, because if I can screen hundreds of patients, thousands of patients, and find 10 times more than I would have, then I'm going to be employing a lot more actual human people than I would have otherwise.
Yeah. And to your point, Jovani, before about IBD, it can also do it across studies. So if you have multiple studies in the same disease area, but with slightly different criteria, it can actually funnel the patients into the right study for you. So you're not spending time going through each protocol assessment and making sure, you have the right one.
Yeah, especially I don't know, Jovani, your situation, for a while we had they like to give you IBDs. They like to give you more than one IBD trial. I feel like we had 6
100%.
for a while,
Yeah.
and they're all slightly different, but not terribly different. But that one little tweak that might make it hard, and that does put a little bit of extra stress on a coordinator or a pre-screen or whoever might be looking through that. So to be able to parse that easily is a big advantage in a therapeutic area where it's hard to find qualified patients anyway.
Right. 100%. Yeah. It's helped out a lot in our IBD just because, like you said, there's a little variance of either a failed drug here or a bowel movement here, a Mayo score. So there's always a little variance, and coordinators miss that. And so, it's hard. You have a coordinator on 6 IBD trials. They all start to blur together, but then you have a tool that kind of can put them in different pots and at least have something stand out to you and say, hey, listen, this one has a tolerance to this. Just that little word can make a big difference, including a patient in one trial or in another. And that's why I like so much that the tool is used across all of our trials. We put them into Inato, a bolus of patients go in there, and it'll push them into each one and say, this one's good for this one, not for this one. And then when we add a new trial, it just does it again, as long as they're in line with the INE. So it's helped us guide our coordinators specifically on same therapeutics to really be like, oh, okay, this one's actually better for this trial. And it makes a big difference.
Yeah, and Liz, talk to me about patients that are maybe coming out of a site database in CTMS or advertising. So incoming, are you guys helping with any of the patient record retrieval? And are you able to sort of fold those patients into the same sort of basic process?
So record retrieval has actually been quite complex, and we've gone down many different roads with this, trying to see who could we even partner with, since it's not, the primary thing that we've been building. And it ends up being more complex, even with other tech providers who, say that they could get the patient consent and then get the records for us. We actually haven't seen the conversion really work out. It still takes people calling where those records are and just keep asking until they come over is what we've seen. So we're still looking for a good solution for records retrieval. But once you have the record, our solution works regardless of where that patient record came from. So we are continuing to think, how do we help get the records? We know that's a pain point, and there hasn't been a really easy answer so far that we've seen in the market for tech that does that well today.
Well, and I almost wonder if it's taking it a step further. Say it's not even the retrieval that's the hard part. It's just because there aren't standardized consistent records across, if you have records at 4 different places, like it's not like I just can't get it. It's like it's here, 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 and we have to like pull it together. So it just becomes a more complex problem than just getting the record.
It is. And there are some portals now where you can request records through, but even that's not seamless. So there's work to be done, especially in the US where you're right, your records are everywhere. How do we get them efficiently? And how do we get all of the records, not just parts of the record, so that you can make a real assessment?
Yeah, that's been something we've been spending a lot of time on, a lot of excruciating time on figuring out the best way as we sort of ramp up more advertising and trying to get patients through that way. So yeah, that's interesting. And honestly, weirdly comforting to know that it's not so easy. Definitely not as easy as, you know, people like to make it out to be. Like, oh, no, you click a button, you're going to have records in 15 minutes. And like, really?
Right.
Are you sure about that?
You'll have something. They'll deliver you something in 15 minutes.
You may. But oftentimes, yeah, I mean, I think I've been curious, like, how many times are there just people on the back end just doing the manual requesting anyway, you know?
Right.
Well, and if it's through a patient portal, then you're also assuming that the patient remembers their login information and all of the next steps that happen.
Oh, yeah.
And often that's where it stops. The patient just is like, oh, I don't remember that system's login. And that's it. That's the end of that particular record retrieval offering. So I do think it's complex. It involves the patient understanding where the records are, getting the right permissions, and then actually getting the records, which shouldn't be so complicated in this day and age, but apparently is still very complicated to do.
Yeah, what's another space I think there are, at least, I mean, there's a good deal of companies trying to sort of crack that again. How successful they've been is hard to say. We can talk maybe offline if you're interested. I mean, we've found some that seem to work better than others and have been good for us, but yeah, it still seems to be a big problem. And then, I mean, obviously as clinical trial sites, we got to have those records. So that's not really optional. So that can certainly limit, you know, your scope and what kind of reach you could have in enrolling patients. And unfortunately, like a lot of the people reaching out to advertising are people who are really highly motivated to be in clinical trials. So it's even worse, like when you can't get their records because like they're sort of like, you know, champing at the bit to be a part of a trial. And you're like, well, I can't qualify you, you know? So
do they help get their own records at all, or is that just not
sometimes?
Something? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, they certainly can. But I mean, it's, and again, I think if you asked me where my medical records were, I'd be like, shit, I don't know. Hold on. Let me like think about this for a minute.
I still have not been able to get my endoscopy results from like 10 years ago. I don't know where they are. What organization has them? Don't know.
Right.
Well, so we create enough barriers for the patient. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, we're in healthcare industry holistically, and it's hard for us. So think about a normal person in the context of their needing to consider a clinical trial. They're already going through so much. Trying to find their medical records is the last thing that they need to focus on.
Yeah, the more barriers you create, the more you lose them.
Yeah.
So you only have a very short window to grab it. Once you start inconveniencing them and having to deal with their doctor, yeah, it's a pain in the butt. You probably won't get them if they got to jump through too many hoops.
Yeah, no, it's true. I think people undervalue that or underappreciate that sometimes. Like just any more burden you keep adding is just pushing that patient like further out the door. And you're like, well, lost them. They're gone.
So we're back in this conversation up to protocol design then, or?
Yeah, literally.
Pretty much. It always is. It always comes back.
Always comes back to protocol design.
I got this protocol I'm working on right now where it says, and they use these very ambiguous words in the protocol where they'll say, something along the lines that they would like to, or it's, that you should wait 3 hours to do a triplicate PK or a triplicate ECG after, they dose. Okay, so what if I don't? Like you said, should. It's implied that I can kind of work in the gray, as you all know, but it's those little things where you have a patient now who's going to dose on site. They're going to wait 3 hours to do a triplicate EKG. How long are you going to keep them, invested in the trial? So protocol design is not getting any better. It's actually getting more complex.
I mean, I would argue I&E criteria are also part of that, where you're creating these like absolutely insane criteria for people who don't exist in the real world.
Yeah, it was the purple squirrels.
So what's interesting about what we're trying to do with this collaboration with sites is actually surface that to sponsors. So our platform's always been two-sided. So we do all this great work to make it more efficient for sites. What we end up doing then is surfacing those insights to sponsors at an aggregate at their trial level. So they can actually see, like, look, this criteria is a big problem for you in this study in real time. They don't have to go and collect everyone's screening logs and talk to every site separately and collect data for 3 months. It's like in real time. You can see this criteria was written poorly and it's making big problems for access.
Hey, your protocol is shit.
Yeah, your endpoints are not going to get FDA approved.
Actual, but yeah, pretty
Maybe
much.
it needs to be.
Well, this is an interesting question. I think that sponsors placing restrictions on sites by not allowing protocol documents shared outside of the study team. Look, I feel like this is one of those funny things where it's like, use AI. If you're not using AI, then you're stupid. You better use it. And then you're like, okay, we're going to use AI. Whoa, you can't do that. So, I mean, I guess how are you guys navigating, or is that a true cause for concern with things like BAAs and NDAs in place? I mean,
yeah. So we allow sites to use our tech across any studies, not just ones that come through Inato. So for studies that Jovani won on his own, didn't come from our matching solution, we typically use the IE criteria on clinicaltrials.gov as our starting point. So we're not breaching any confidentiality agreements that the site has with that particular sponsor. And then we do not use the open forms of AI. We have our own instance. So we're not training any algorithms based on the patient data we're evaluating. So we really have been thoughtful about building a system that still complies with confidentiality, has the right agreements in place. We do have BAAs with sites, and also just doesn't train the models for the future so that we're not putting anything into OpenAI or any of the open AI models, which I think is really important from how we handle the discussion with the sponsors, because they are concerned about those things. And I'm constantly telling sponsors, it would be helpful if you could give sites some direction on this, because they have a perspective. And without sharing that perspective to sites, sometimes sites will just say, we shouldn't use it because we haven't gotten permission yet from the sponsor and we do not want to hurt our relationship with the sponsor. But actually, many of the sponsors are fine with using the new tech as long as those safeguards are in place. So I do speak a lot to sponsors about sharing with sites about this innovation and how it can be used, within the parameters of your confidentiality agreements. And it's something very important for the sponsors to share with sites, because otherwise it will stop some sites from using it, even though it's good tech that could help them along the way. And actually at SDRS, is that next week already?
It is next week, yeah.
We actually have one of our sponsors who has us as part of their booth handouts to explain that this is part of innovation and you can use Inato for work like this. I thought that was very progressive of them to actually share with sites. They still can choose. Sites are it's up to you what tech you want to use. But if you want something that's compliant and something that we understand well, this is a good option to consider with Inato.
How have you found the ct.gov INE criteria?
So it's more limited than the full protocol. But to be transparent, when you're thinking about pre-screening patients, there's typically some key criteria that either patients qualify for or not.
Okay.
So the first set of checks that we do is this the right diagnosis? Are they hitting the key criteria before we even put it in front of a site to say, go deeper with this particular patient? So if you think about it through that lens, the IE criteria on ct.gov usually gets you enough to get started to sort through the patients and have a good list to share with the sites to dig deeper into.
Yeah, I mean, there's a decent amount of criteria that I don't want checked against anyway, because it's perspective, really. It's going to be happening during the screening process, or, I may not care about a previous lab because I'm going to check it. I want to check it at screening anyway. I feel like, yeah, you kind of get to that. Yeah, it's not perfect, but what is the saying? Don't let perfect be the enemy of good. So at least you're getting a starting place that's not
cool,
6,000 patients. Instead, maybe it's 500, and then you're like have a much more targeted way to sort of go. So that, yeah, I get what you're saying. I mean, clinicaltrials.gov is, let's say, problematic at the very least, but I think it still can provide at least a reasonable starting point for most studies anyways. Some are, may have a lot to do with how well that particular entry was written for on ct.gov.
Well, and that's sort of just my fundamental problem in general. One of the reasons why I think it's a challenge is because sponsors are so restricted on potentially what they're allowing folks to share and what they think is competitive. But I think it's like, does it matter what sites you have? Does it matter what I&E criteria? I don't think that's going to be like scooped by someone else. Like, I think just being more collaborative in general would help everyone.
Well, I don't know, Jovani, I certainly willing to hear I've looked now at dozens of IBD protocols across different sponsors. They're not that much different from each other. Nobody would be like, no, I don't think any sponsor would look at a different ones and be like, oh, wow, a secret.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I like the funnel approach, like just what the basics. I like it for pre-screening. I don't necessarily care to use AI for screening. Those are variances that are going to happen during screening. Yeah. I just need to know if I have a good candidate to even have a discussion with. And so if I can have, and one of the things that we do is we have our own a recruiter that is less, he's not like a coordinator, which I want him like that. I just want him to be very shiny, very bubbly. Hey, you may match this clinical trial for this. Do you have this? Do you have this? Yes, I do. Okay, let me put you in contact with our coordinator, who then has the more broad experience, more granular experience with the protocol. I just want to know if the patient is even interested and has any potentiality of screening, which that right there is building your database. You can always follow up with that patient later on. Maybe they have something else. Maybe they have fatty liver. Maybe they have hypertension. Mm-hmm. Who knows? No lead is a lead that's not willing that we don't follow up on. Even if they say I'm not interested. Okay, for now. But I'm going to call you in 6 months.
You've seen probably too, you've probably seen too that like, oh well, you know what, my cousin has this,
exactly.
And let me give them a call because, and right. I think we seem to share a lot of the same philosophies because like I've seen this happen. I'd rather talk to 1,000 people who don't necessarily qualify than miss out by kicking people out because it's a bigger game, so to speak. It's a longer game. And, it's educating people about clinical trials generally. It's getting, more connection in your community. And again, all those things, just like you said, now they know they have a place they can call too. If anything does come up or change, it's a longer and more important game than like,
I think so.
Do you qualify for our study? Get out. No, you don't get out of here. You qualify for our study? No, get out of here.
Yeah, we don't even ask like, hey, how are you doing? I mean, if you just call them 6 months from now, hey, Jeff, how are you doing? I'm doing, matter of fact, I lost my insurance. Oh, I might have a trial for you. Who's your doctor? It's just using AI to fill the clerical day-to-day stuff that doesn't require any personality or anything like that. Refine your patients and bring the humanity back into research where you're just trying to find out how this person is doing. And, sites don't have the time. Coordinators are burnt out. I think we need to rethink how we engage people in research and allowing this technology to help us offset some of our time to then focus on what matters is nothing but a plus for the site and the industry as a whole, because it's a slow moving industry. I mean, research hasn't really gone leaps and bounds in the past decade, but it doesn't mean it's not going to. And I think the people that are early adopters, at least to understand how to navigate this technology, are going to be way ahead of the game. And, it's just a matter of how to do it the right way. And this is why we have talks like this to get perspectives. And, like Liz has a certain skill set. We as owners of sites have a certain, skill set. And I think it's just the collaboration that needs to happen so that patients can have more access to trials.
And I love that concept of using AI to bring humanity back in research.
It's true.
It is. I love it.
It's really true. If you use it the right way. If you take your little chat bot and have it reach out to a patient, you're going to lose that. But And the little chatbots are getting really good at it right now. But nonetheless, they have to say, I'm an AI agent, okay, and then introduce themselves. But if you use that to then increase your volume of patients that you can talk to on a human level, you can spend an afternoon, condense your recruiter's time by 4 hours and say, I need you to reach out to these patients and just find out how they're doing. That I don't see any sites really doing that. This could allow for that.
Yeah, no, I love that. So we're down to the last couple minutes here. If you guys got any other comments, please get them in. Yes, just sort of any final thoughts. Liz, I'm also curious, you guys have anything like on your roadmap right now that's maybe compelling for sites, or are you guys still just kind of building out the processes for what you're doing now?
Yeah, so we're really looking to partner with sites on that whole experience. So from EHR to patient pre-screening to CTMS. So I think that's our big focus right now, is getting sites to adopt the technology and understand how it can build these efficiencies and then spend more time with your patients. So really, really love that part. We are really into improving access for people in the communities through their doctors and care teams. So use tech to reduce some of the burden in clinical trials and focus on the people in clinical research. So we love that as a closing. So well done, Jovani, on bringing it forward to the patient. But that would be all I would close with, is I think this is an exciting time for clinical research to use tech to reduce some of the burden so we can focus back on the people and make it a better experience for all parties.
Very good. Any final thoughts, Jovani?
Nope, just happy. I'm very excited to be in this era. I think it's a good era for us in research. I think that these new innovations are going to take dinosaurs out and bring back new, fresh blood into the industry. We can learn from the people that have been here, but it's time to rethink this, use younger minds, collaborate, and find out the balance between old school and new school, and kind of find that nice bridge between us both, and move the industry forward.
Very well said. All right. Well, thank you guys both for coming on. Denali, we'll be back later this week, right?
Yeah, we got a sticky notes on Thursday.
All right. Thank you guys for tuning in. And again, thank you, Liz, and thanks, Jovani. Take it easy, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Note to File. We're committed to continuing to bring you independent and unfiltered coverage of the clinical trial industry.
We want to talk about what you want to hear. So if you have something on your mind, hit us up at notetofilepodcast.com.